learnings along the way in relationship to a constantly changing playing field or a process that was very bumpy, where the original idea as a garden center, a native plant nursery, evolved into this larger $55 million, on some levels internationally unique facility focused on cities, was a crazy ride.
The first 80% was actually coming up with the idea itself at this really unique location. And the idea itself was so inspiring and strong that it helped to fuel everything else. So let's transform that industrial heritage site into an ecological center that engages youth at risk, and it'll have a social enterprise component. That's really cool. I like that idea. Everybody said, how do we make it happen? Then the next 20% took like 8 years, right? Because it was then how do we do it? So I often sort of think that it was the idea itself was more than half the battle.
Its destiny was to stay a moribund bunch of bricks without incredible leadership and incredible determination and vision and the whole package. And so that in the original, I would have said this was 80% is a project and 20% leadership. At the end, that was 90% leadership and 10 or 15% the fact the buildings are there, because they could have stayed these buildings for another 30 years, empty and unloved.
Not knowing much about the site, I mean, I dropped by one day and took a good look around, and being an architect by training, it kind of reminded me of Sarajevo after the war. And it was hard to sort of imagine mining a gem out of all the junk, but it was there.
The common man would say, demolish it. It's lived its useful life. It's ugly. It's rusted. It's got no beauty. Get rid of it and build something nice in its place. And the convincing it took of everybody, when the provincial government opted in, that was an enormous help. But everybody had to be convinced that there was value in these buildings.
I kept saying, but there's all this stuff over here. What's all that stuff for? Like, why don't we go over there? Why don't we take the roof off this whole thing and make it an urban farm? Why don't we have trees growing up through the buildings? Why can't we have skating? Why don't we have a place where we have a fire? Why don't we just use the generosity of the urban space? So, good ideas are just good ideas.
We took a burned out industrial complex and turned it into an amazing place. And I can't sort of reiterate that enough. Like the place had been here since '83, abandoned. It had lots of sort of casual users, most of whose uses were illegal. It had been given up on by most of the bureaucracy at City Hall as being something that it's just too hard to do. So what we did was a pretty amazing thing. We made it into an amazing place.